Got some OC from last night. Was hoping I would find one of these threads when I got back. Anyways, Greentext. Me and my friend John are sitting in Valero about 10 at night, sipping on peace tea, sucking up some free Wi-Fi. Our friends, Dylan, Kyler, and Caleb, get done with whatever they were doing at the school and roll up. Valero is like our small town's Walmart. We talk, decide to buy some Monster, tea, and Mountain Dew, and build up a bonfire to chill around all night. Run by my house. Acquired M44 Nugget, Mossenberg 500, already carry Glock 20. Go to John's house. Fuck huge bonfire built up in the middle of his huge field, surrounded by miles of woods on 3 sides. Pretty legit. Field is about 6 acres wide. We all back trucks up and do some tailgating, grill some steaks that Kyler brought. Having a good time, talking about shit. Start hearing a shitload of coyotes howling and yelping and stuff. John says there are always this pack of coyotes that hang around but are scared of humans. Well, fuck, alright. Wanted to shoot something. 2 hours later, need a piss. Go behind truck and let it flow. 4 sets of eyes reflected back from the light of the fire. Nope, not AVI. Draw Glock 20. Take a couple of pot shots, and they disappear. Get the spotlight out and go over. Everyone armed to check for blood. Of course, nothing there but some footprints that look like a cross between a bear and a deer track. Alright. Can we not do this, please? Go back to the truck and keep talking, but keep guns ready. We hear some god-awful screeching sound coming from our 1 o'clock. Oh shit, that JPEG. Shine spotlight where it came from. Nothing there. It sounded really close to us, but it wouldn't have time to run away. Put down my shotgun and look back at the group. There's a fucking guy standing on the other side of the fire. He's just smiling away and like giggling in a really deep voice. We all know he needs to die. We all unload on it, stir up ashes from the bonfire because of muzzle blast. Takes the longest 30 seconds of my life for the smoke to clear. He's still standing there, but with his back to us. He says, in an inhumanly deep voice,
"You shouldn't have fucking done that."
He just starts screaming, and he falls to the ground and starts convulsing. I yell at everyone to get in the trucks and speed back to the fucking Valero to talk. Out of the field in about 5 seconds. See Ethan's truck swerve a little in my rearview mirror and see a thing that looks like a bear on steroids barely lit up by his headlights. Look back onto the road. It's right in front of me. I hit it doing 85 and it falls across my hood and falls up. Ethan passes me up, noping so hard. Finally, get the Valero. Bitches must have thought we were crazy as shit walking into Valero holding long guns and me open carrying my Glock. Everybody knows everybody, so we tell them it's all good and don't worry about it. But they're like, fuck, alright. Talk about it, and decide to go back to my house and stay there. As we get up, the guy who was at the field walks in. All casual, wearing clean clothes and just stares at us as we walk past. Fuck no. Get in trucks, go to my house half an hour away. Dude staring at us from inside as I pull away, and he starts to smile. Get to my house. Invite one chick over after a couple of hours. It's now about 2:30. 8 out of 10. Ant bites for tits, but most fantastic ass I've ever seen. Arrives in a truck. We call her Jennifer. She says she was creeped out because she saw a dude with long hair and jeans on the side of the road trying to hitchhike 3 times on the way to the house. Oh shit. Keep hearing knocks at the door. We keep 2 people on each door. You can't enter anywhere else in the house. Like, it's not fucking possible at all. While watching the back door with Jennifer, knocks cease, and she does the whole scared girl thing. We end up having a quickie. Pretty great. It was directly in front of the door, on a chair about 2 feet away. No possible way of entry. The other watch team kept their eye on the door the entire time. Hear screaming and turn around. This motherfucker is doing the same convulsing shit he did in the field, in the middle of my house. We don't even ask questions. We hop in the trucks and leave. We all see him like 5 times. We just drive around town. We occasionally stop to talk. Keep seeing this guy all around town, in his hairy form and his human form. We fill up at Valero again, and we drive 2 hours to Dallas and stay at a hotel. Decided safe after 2 days. Saw him multiple times on the way up through, but ignore it. Come back this morning and haven't seen him yet. So fucking done. I know for a fact other people make up these skinwalker stories, but god damn, this shit seriously happened to me. It's the biggest adrenaline rush I've had in my life. And that's saying something, considering I've been in multiple fights. I'll contribute. Not really as much in the woods as it is something weird that happened to me in the woods, but whatever. Live in small Texas town, watching the news with some friends. Story about some lights seen over a forest. Popular camping spot, about a 45-minute drive from my house. Me and friends decide to go camp there, see if we see anything. 3 days later, we set up camp. Friends get shit-faced, but I didn't. For whatever reason that day, my stomach couldn't handle alcohol, so I just didn't drink. Otherwise, I'd be right there with them. At about 1 a.m., friends drunkenly stumbled to their tents. Still somewhat awake, so I just wandered around so I could smoke a cigarette before passing out. 1:30ish, I see someone walking around. Could tell they were smoking because the cherry on their cigarette was bobbing up and down as they walked. Keep in mind, small town Texas. Something like UFOs attract a good amount of people, so seeing someone else walk around there wasn't that shocking. We were both walking the same direction, about 100 feet away from each other. Get to a well-lit trail. Glance over to see who the mysterious person is. It was me. Same green wife beater. Same green jacket. Hairstyle, glasses, shoes, shorts. Same brand of cigarette. Right down to the fucking Majora's Mask tattoo I have. See him look up and glance back at me. Start heading at my direction at a slightly, but noticeably, faster pace. Tap into 4 years of track and nope the fuck back the campsite. Slept in my truck. I read somewhere that because we only see ourselves in mirrors or photos, if we were to see our own clone, we wouldn't recognize them, but I swear to Christ, that fucker was me. Texas has some pretty spooky shit. Been here all my life. Back when I was a kiddo, my old man and I would hunt with my older brother and sister out in Kerrville. I remember our trailer would periodically smell like rust/blood when we'd camp, but we always got used to it. There was some scary shit that went out there. I distinctly remember when I was 11 and my dad shot a deer right behind the front shoulder, but it buggied, so we had to go tracking. It was around mid-November, started to get dark real quick, so I had my SKS, which I'd been killing deer with since I was 6, on me, with a dull as fuck flashlight. My sister was back at camp cooking and reading, while we followed the blood trail, being crafty. My dad put me in this valley, where we found a pretty good pool of it, and I sat atop a boulder, just to mark the spot while he took my brother, and put him further out past the tree line, deep along the ravine. Where we were, there were tons of rocks all over the place, so I got up on that boulder and had a pretty good vantage. Also had a decent clearing of about 50 to 75 yards around me. Well, that night started to set, and the temp was around 50 or so, dropping into the 40s with me in the middle of this clearing with light overcast and a full moon. I remember clicking the light off to save battery and letting my eyes adjust to my surroundings, seeing the alternating pitch black to relatively moonlit valley in decent clarity. Just about 30 or 40 minutes after my brother and dad started tromping through the woods, leaving me alone, I remember hearing some coyotes and seeing them on the outskirts of the clearing. Not necessarily circling, though they paused for a bit to look, and then continued on. I sat quietly on the boulder, watching nature go by with the wind picking up slowly, giving a gentle strobing effect with the cloud overcast, just alternating with light/no light. I heard them yip and howl for a few minutes, and then they started to fade away. Minutes after that, I heard a resounding shot, and the report of impact, like a boom with a quick thud, meaning it was some distance between the two, and figured after they found the deer and put it down at range, or somebody shot a coyote. Around this time, I heard a scream which got me real worried. Then just utter silence. The wind stopped howling. The squatty pine tree stopped rustling. I couldn't hear any of the yelping of the coyotes in the distance. Just dead silence. After a bit, I started hearing some loud thuds on my right, like rocks banging together up a ways along the hillside. On the furthest distance, about 75 yards of the clearing, I saw a few rocks down the side, watching them when they first came into view bouncing along, tumbling, then just listening as the clouds blacked out the clearing, and then watching them again come to a complete stop after a bit. Conventional thought stabbed me through the biting cold, and I got real low on the boulder, with the SKS ready in my hands, aiming at the point of origin. Just hearing my breathing contrast harshly against the mind-numbing quiet. A few more rocks did this from the same spot, and I saw a dark silhouette through the trees. Not quite in the clearing, but rather a few yards deep in the trees. I saw a pair of antlers when the light picked back up, and when it went dark, I could hear some heavy breathing along the edge of the clearing, me thinking it was some injured deer. Keyed a little radio that we all had 3 times to signal distress so that my dad and brother would come back. I turned the volume really low and sat quietly on the rock, making sure not to silhouette myself as I peered into the darkness with my scope, trying to get a good picture. I remember seeing the outline, somewhat upright in the light, like it was a buck that stretched its neck out. It's going dark, and then nothing. I panicked a bit. Despite being 11 and knowing the hooves of deer should clack pretty fucking loud out there if they moved at all, especially if it was that goddamn silent. So I sat and waited, not moving a muscle as the pool of blood next to me seemed to lazily waft itself into my nose. It wasn't particularly overpowering or anything, but it cut in pretty strong as I scanned again when the clouds cleared up for a few moments, looking for anywhere that thing could have gone. My radio keyed back twice, meaning somebody wanted to talk, and my stomach dropped. I keyed 3 times again and saw lights over my left shoulder, where my dad and brother went down the track after the buck, still a few hundred or so yards off in the distance. I sat there, jittering quietly in the cold, in an absolute void, with a lingering hope that my dad and brother would catch up. The light went out again, and I could hear those rocks rolling, just a bit from the spot a little further up the hill and a few yards closer. The rocks rolled into vision. When the cloud passed and I looked up, I could see a dark figure of antlers, like 60-something yards away, with a few trees in between. Knowing where my brother and dad were, I leveled out the rifle and started to wait for a clear shot. It stepped out, and I was a hair away from the trigger falling when it went dark, so I waited patiently for the moon to come out again. When it did, whatever was out there disappeared completely, which didn't make much sense, considering it was behind a few trees with some considerable openings to each side. I scanned again in a direction when the wind backed up and the trees started to move, with the hillside coming alive again. I heard the footsteps of my family behind me, some 90 yards out, and slowly crept off the boulder to go meet them, keeping the rifle close to me the whole entire time. When we met, my brother started giving me shit about how I was screaming and crying being all alone, while he and my old man were tracking blood. Being the good brother that he is, when I told them I hadn't made a sound, they raised their brows and started claiming I was full of shit. I asked about the shot I heard, and apparently it was a ways off in the next property over, since we were on a property line. They found a pretty good blood trail that left the origin of where I was in just about a straight line, all the way to some crushed bush about 400 yards out, having this deer bleed profusely the whole time, which was somewhat unreal. Then, after the trail ended, they moved about a few thousand yards or so, just to scan the area where they heard the shot, and it sounded like it was over the low fence line. I told them about seeing what I described as a deer, but I didn't say much on the subject, except that it left without me getting a good look at it. We hiked it back up the hill in a staggered column, with my brother picking up the rear with his lever action .243, and my dad leading with his 7mm rem mag, still scanning around as we made our way back to the truck. When we got there, my brother Cody and I hopped in the bed of the truck, with him overlooking the cabin, and me looking over the tailgate, and we started our way down a pretty long trail to the camp house. After a mile or so, we had to take a detour to the rough bush, because of a few trees collapsed on the trail, so we started going round through some clearings in the Dodge. Just before we got back onto the trail, it got real tight with the trees, and we had to get out and walk in front of the truck to make sure it could fit. After getting everything cleared out and altering some limbs, we assumed the same spots on the truck, and were just about to get back on the road when I spotted another pair of different antlers nestled in between the brush. At that moment, I hollered to my dad, with his windows rolled down, took out his 1911 out of the center console, and blasted a buck between his eyes with his 230 GR HST, dropping it on the spot. Turns out that was the deer he was looking for, but it ended up a few miles down the path with a heart shot, which is fucking impossible. It looked like it had a good gouge on it, just a bit behind the point of impact on the ribs, like it had fallen on punji sticks or something. There was no blood trail near anywhere, no nothing, just a deer standing between 2 bushes by itself with a nice assortment of gouges in it. We loaded it up in the back of the truck, and I sat on top of it with my SKS pointed at its head. For the rest of the night, everything went according to plan. We skinned and quartered the deer up and iced the meat. But over the next 8 years or so, my brother and I would hear screams on our hunts at night, when there shouldn't be people out there for the next 10 or so miles. There were all kinds of burial grounds and shit on the land. We found piles of old arrowheads and Victorian-era utensils in old burnt-down houses that had been there since the settlement of Texas. I told my sis about what happened, she being the oldest of the kids, and she joked about Native American mythology and the Wendigo in a natural teasing manner. I'm not so sure it's a joke out there. But yeah, that's it. There were some other things, but nothing got me like that night. I never had another horrid run-in like that. But there were instances on the land that creeped me the fuck out. We'd find an old stone building with just piles of animal skulls stacked to the ceiling, filling the room up there. There'd be all kinds of old, horribly rusted Civil War era rifles stuck in the mud or laying around in the stone buildings with broken receivers and other ailments. Lots of history up in there. Used to be deep Comanche territory, but I'm not too sure they had something like the northern tribes as far as mythology goes. Okay, so I got a couple. They're more unsettling than too spoopy. Be a teenager in the late 90s. Just moved to butt-fucking Egypt in rural Texas with my mom and little sister. 10 to 15 miles from the closest town in any direction, all of which are tiny as fuck, less than 100 people. Only 3 neighbors for miles. Area is almost completely woods, interspread with a few cattle pastures and corn/wheat fields. Start doing odd jobs for the neighbors and make some cash to buy video. One of the neighbors, a 90-year-old guy who's lived there his whole life, tells me there's a lake hidden in the woods and that it's a good fishing spot. Next day, decide to go exploring to see if I could catch some dinner at the lake. Pack Junior in a woods kit, backpack, fishing gear, a day's ration, flashlight, hatchet, machete, .22 LR for plinking, and a few other odds and ends. Set out in the woods adjacent to my house in direction of lake. For about an hour of cutting my way through the brush, I come across a small, well-worn trail. Figure this might lead to the lake, so I follow it. It's a bit grown up, but obviously trafficked fairly regularly. It doesn't take long to realize that it's leading away from the direction of the lake. Being a curious adventurer I am, I decide to see where it leads anyway. Figured it'll probably just dump me out in some back pasture. About half an hour later, the trail comes to a small clearing with an abandoned cabin in it. Place is old, in the process of being reclaimed by the woods, lopsided from being partially sunken into the ground on one side. What was once obviously a stone chimney is now just a pile of rocks. Walked around to the front and see there's a 2-foot stone goat statue on a large tree stump near the door. What the fuck? Start getting a leery feeling, but write it off as my imagination. Door is gone from the cabin, so I decide to poke around inside. Sun filtered in through the cracks and holes in the ceiling, but it was still too dark to see well. Turned my flashlight and went in. Trash and dried blood fucking everywhere. Rusty axe laying on the floor, also covered in dried blood. Edges caked in God knows what, but I distinctly see a clump of hair. Nope the fuck out of there faster than Usain Bolt. Stuck mostly to the same trail back, but cut through the woods in a few places. On the way out, caught a whiff of a rotting corpse. Running in absolute terror and adrenaline. Cut the shit by the time I made it out of the woods. Mom didn't believe me when I told her the story. She said it was probably animals. No animal did that. I asked the same neighbor about the cabin a few days later. He told me nobody had lived out there in decades. Still don't know what the fuck is down there.